Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I am Bill Oram, joined as always by Brenna Greene from Coin6 in Portland, Oregon. Brenna, good morning to you. How are you this fine day?
I'm good. This is before we started the podcast, we were talking about how this is kind of the time of year. These next few weeks are a little bit calmer. And then we head into NCAA baseball, and then kind of the draft's right there. And then we have Summer League, and then it's another calm 4 weeks. So we're kind of in the calm right now, minus the fact that the draft lottery is on Monday, and that might be something, and it might be absolutely nothing. So there you go.
It's funny because this particular lottery has been, on the horizon for, the Blazers and the rest of the NBA for quite some time. The Cooper
Yes.
flag phenomenon has been out there for at least a couple of years, more for people who really study it. He's the clear number one overall pick. Plenty of teams tanked for him. We could go down that list, but Utah wants him, so they went 17 and 65. Washington, Charlotte, New Orleans. Those teams are all bad and have the 4 best odds of winning the lottery. The Blazers, however, had that second half uptick, finished 36 and 46, and practically speaking, should not be in the Cooper flag sweepstakes because of just the way the season went, and they took themselves out of the best chances of having a number one pick or even really a top 4 pick. But Brenna Greene, hope springs eternal. And I will tell you, the number of conversations I had with people in and around the Blazers this year, when I would lament that while I thought that their winning was fun and good for their players' development, I worried that it was not worth what they were losing in potential lottery pick. And people would say, I trust that the basketball gods will reward us for doing the right thing, for playing it straight. And so, Brenna, I have a little bit of an exercise to start off this podcast.
Yes.
You're familiar with tankathon.com?
Oh, I am.
Tankathon, for those who are not initiated, and if you want to hop on over there, is essentially the Bible of choice in the NBA for tanking teams. I remember I was first exposed to Tankathon at an NCAA tournament game in Anaheim some number of years ago, and a general manager I knew ran a team that was not winning, was sitting there on his phone with Tankathon up, giddily running the lottery simulator as players that he could potentially be drafting were playing on the court in front of us in Anaheim. So Tankathon, great resource, has draft odds, has the lottery order, but also has a lottery simulator. So with a click of a button, you can simulate what's going to happen in a room in Chicago on Monday. Essentially the same sort of smoke and mirrors type, dark robes and, mystery that's happening in Vatican City right now. Puff of black smoke, puff of white smoke, new pope. Same similar deal. But we can do it right here on the Oregonian Sports Podcast. We don't have to wait for Monday. And if you look at the draft odds, which we've probably beaten to death here, but the Blazers have nearly a 17% chance, 16.9% chance of getting into the top 4, and a 3.7% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. 3.7%, not good relative to Utah, which has 14, Washington, Charlotte, 14, New Orleans, 12.5, Philly, 10.5, and so on down the list. The Blazers have the 10th best odds. 3.7% means that out of 100 times, the Blazers should get the number 1 pick at least 3 times. Maybe close to 1 out of every 25. Brenna, my question for you is, how many tries do you think it's going to take me on the draft simulator on Tankathon to get the Blazers the number 1 overall pick?
Well, it's funny that you tell me this because last night I think it was yesterday morning, I was perusing my Instagram stories and I had a friend who got it in 12 times. So shout out Tao, a loyal Blazers fan living in New York City. What a time for her right now. And so, I'm gonna go 20. No. I'll go 16.
16. Okay, Brenna
Yeah.
says 16. I mean, you guys are gonna have to trust me. I don't think I can screen share here. So you're just gonna have to trust me when I tell you what's happening on my screen, okay?
Are you going to
But
guess?
I am. I think I'm gonna get it on the first try.
Okay.
Okay, here I go.
Here you
Tell
go.
me when.
When?
Okay. I was not correct. Portland stays at number 10. Washington gets the first pick. That's one. Going again.
This is
Washington. Okay. Breaking news. Breaking news on the second try. We got Portland, the number 2 overall pick, behind Washington. The Blazers jump from 10 to number 2 behind Washington. Big news in the NBA. Stop the presses. Still not what we were trying to do here, but number 2. Brenna, who are you taking with the number 2 pick if you're the Portland Trailblazers?
Oh, gosh. I should be more knowledgeable in this than what I am.
Your choices are probably Dylan Harper, VJ Edgecombe, or Ace Bailey.
You know, here's the deal. I listened to a podcast the other day, and this was a good point. 2 out of 3 of those guys were on Rutgers and couldn't make the NCAA tournament. You know, it's like you have 2 of the top 4 lottery picks, and they couldn't even get to the NCAA tournament. So, you know what? I'm going to go VJ.
Okay. That's sound reasoning. I wrote an entire column when Rutgers came to Eugene and got pasted by the Ducks that was along those lines. I'm still taking Dylan Harper, despite the positional duplicacy and issues that creates. I think he's the best player behind Cooper Flagg. Okay, two draft simulations. We haven't gotten the Blazers the number 1 pick yet. Let's keep going.
Fantastic.
Okay,
audio.
Third time they stay at 10. New Orleans gets the number 1 pick. Hasn't been good for Utah so far. Fourth time, Blazers stay at 10. San Antonio gets the number 1 pick. You know what we don't need? Is San Antonio getting the number 1 pick again. My goodness. Nope. Okay, fifth try. Utah gets the number 1 pick, but the Blazers are up to number 4. Great place for the Blazers to be. They can just take the guy who's left. So we've gotten the Blazers into the top 4 2 out of 5 times. This is encouraging if I'm a Blazers fan. I will tell you that. Okay, 6th try. Blazers are number 3. Charlotte number 1, Blazers number 3. This is uncanny. The Blazers have gotten into the top 4 in our simulation 3 out of the 6 times. Is that right? My goodness. Okay, still
3
going.
5?
3 out of 6. Number 7, okay. Blazers stick at number 10. Charlotte gets the number 1 pick. Number 8, Charlotte gets the number 1 pick, and Portland stays at number 10. Number 9, Charlotte gets the number 1 pick, and Blazers stay at 10. Oof.
The
number
odds
10,
are coming back.
10! The Portland Trailblazers get the number 1 pick in the 2025 NBA draft on our 10th simulation. Brenna, this is news.
But
so
hey,
really,
for the record, I won.
Based on our simulation, the Blazers have a 40% chance of getting into the top 4 and a 10% chance of a number 1 pick. The basketball gods, like, I don't actually know who runs Tankathon. Could it be the basketball gods? Like something they do in their spare time, like a passion project?
The unidentified basketball gods. We'll see.
I'm really glad that we got there because I'm not sure how much longer the bit could have gone on if we were like up to like the 73rd simulation. People might have tuned out of the podcast.
Yeah. You know, I guess I'm just. Last year, I was not in the country when the NBA draft happened or draft lottery happened. So it was I'm just going to say it. It was hilarious waking up and seeing the Blazers get the 7th pick and watching everyone and their mom have a meltdown on Twitter. I mean, it was absolute just dire from so many Blazers fans on there and Blazers people. And I'm like, yep, this is this franchise. Like, I don't know why people are freaking out. Like, this is what it normally is. And also, I was like, I don't really understand why people are losing their minds this draft. Because in my brain, I was like, this is not the one that you even want to get a top pick in.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
mm-hmm.
don't get excited about this one. Like, in fact, in a way, you're kind of happy you got that pick because it's like, man, I don't want to push my luck for a second year. I would rather get a lower pick this year and a higher pick next year. So we'll see what happens. As we know, the Blazers have not had. I mean, the number 3 pick was pretty good luck a few years back, I'd say. That was decent. Of course, it caused a chain reaction, but that was probably a necessary chain reaction at the end of the day.
I think Blazers moved up from 5 to 3 in that lottery.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then last year they were 4th and dropped to 7 and had a 50% chance of a top 4 pick. It's funny. Like, I don't know what the Blazers would have done with a top 4 pick in last year's draft. They say they would have still taken Klingon, like that he was like somebody they really wanted there. And that could be like, and that probably would have been a fine pick there. But like, based on what we saw last year, even you look at the top 5 in that draft, Ricochet went number 1. He was kind of okay. Alexander Sarr, has not been great in Washington, but nobody's good in Washington. Reed Shepherd doesn't play for the Rockets, although I think he's still going to be really, really good there. Stephon Castle was Rookie of the Year in San Antonio, and Ron Holland to Detroit, kind of fringe rotation guy. And then Saloon went to the Hornets, and then you get to Klingon at 7. Like, I mean, like you said, not the draft where you wanted to, where you necessarily, if you believe in the basketball gods, you did not want to use up your spiritual capital with them in last year's lottery. You wanted to save it up for this year. That said, I mean, as fun as it is, and as fun as it is to like, the odds are not in the Blazers' favor of this, working out in a meaningfully significant way for them. That said, I mean, last year, Atlanta jumped to number 1 from the 9th spot. The Blazers do have, I have to reset so I can see it, but they do have that 16% chance, nearly 17% chance at a top 4 pick. A top 4 pick would be great for the Blazers for where they are. In terms of like still needing more talent, still needing to figure out who the lead player on this team is going to be. I don't believe that the Blazers are really in like, hey, we're now a playoff team mode. I think that that's a little bit of fool's gold for where this franchise is. So, I mean, you're still trying to bring up the overall talent level. So a top 4 pick, I mean, obviously you want Cooper Flag. Don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, if you go into Monday, with whatever you do for good luck, hoping the Blazers can get Cooper Flag. But, you'd be excited to bring in any of those guys who are kind of seen as the top 4 to just help raise the level of talent in this franchise. Regardless of position, by the way, because there's nobody on this roster who has shown that they are so good that they shouldn't be pushed, at their position. Yeah, I mean, Denny Advia and Tamani Kamara have a spot kind of no matter what, even if you draft a wing. But I mean, I'm drafting a guard without hesitation. If it's a point guard, Dylan Harper, without hesitation. Either he will make Scoot better, or you'll figure it out in a couple of years, just like the Sacramento Kings did with De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. Like you make decisions, but figure it out.
Decisions were made that were not great.
But here's what I would say. Like, okay, so fine. Like, but Sacramento felt like they had a window. They were further along with De'Aaron than they were with Tyrese. Everybody knew Tyrese was going to be really good, but it got them an all-star, and they got the number 2 seed in the West and made the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. And like had a really, and like then it fell apart. Things fall apart. Like, and that was unfortunate. But like the what they did was sound.
The center cannot hold. There's some good old fashioned high school English class literacy coming at you.
Is it because I said Things Fall Apart, which was
correct.
also a novel we had to read in high school? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Got there.
Fond memories of sophomore English. Freshman English?
I don't remember what year I read that in. This is really important stuff.
It might have been freshman English because we had unfortunately, there was one of our teachers on the faculty at my high school had passed away from cancer that year. And so they brought in like an interim English teacher, and it was an utter disaster. It was the first time that this person who was like a late career change into English teaching, this woman came in and had no ability to take command of our rowdy classroom, and it was
Oh,
the biggest disaster I've ever encountered. And I remember she was trying to get us to read Things Fall Apart, and like things fell apart. Like
I
I literally have it on my bookshelf right now with a note from one of my friends from that class reminiscing reminiscing
wow,
about what a disaster that was.
that's so funny.
Hold on, we can find it. Um, um, maybe it's in here. I
Well,
happened to see this book, and of course, I automatically thought of you. So many memories of sitting in class together, cursing said teacher and her tendencies. So yeah, that's in this card.
we
Things fall
had
apart.
my freshman year as well. We had a history teacher do an exchange with a teacher from Germany. So we had a teacher from Germany teaching us history, and their school system is a bit different than ours, I'd say. It was a similar level of chaos. I mean, insane. My class, my second period class with her was one of the more tame ones. And we would, as a joke, whenever she turned her back to us and wrote on the whiteboard, see how long we could stand on our desks, on top of our desks before she would catch us. And we were not a bad class compared to she had some crazy classes. And also she didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know how to give a test in America. Like they had completely different testing systems in
Sure.
Germany, of course. And so the tests were just disasters. It was pretty bad.
This teacher we had would like let the kids basically like take control of the class for like the
Yep.
entire hour, and then at the end she'd be like, okay, now write an essay on the book for that's your homework. It's like, we haven't even talked about the book, like you didn't even like and then we would convince her that she couldn't give us homework because she hadn't like actually like given a not lecture in high school, but like we hadn't actually
Lesson.
like addressed a lesson or it's addressed the subject matter whatsoever. So my friend Joanna and I actually cared about like learning, and so we've like basically petitioned to do an independent study during that class because it was just so horrid.
Wow.
Just not everybody's made to be a teacher. And that, by the
No.
way, support your teachers, because like what they do is hard, and they
Yes.
if you're a parent, they watch your kids for like 6 hours for free if you're in the public school system. Okay. Back to what matters here.
Yes.
You are not suggesting by any chance that the Blazers should be drafting for position if they were in the top 4 of this draft,
No.
were you? You would not hesitate. You would not shy. Your point about Rutgers is well taken, although I think college basketball is kind of neither here nor there when it comes to applying the skill set to the NBA. Although the thing I wrote at the time was like, how are they going to save the Blazers if they can't save Rutgers? So you and I are similarly minded.
Yeah.
But I mean, the biggest positional like conflict you would say is like, oh, the Blazers, they can't draft another guard. They're going to create the same problem they've always had, too many guards. I mean, what guard do they have that you are building around? Like Shaden Sharp has been really good, and obviously he's the one that you could point to and say maybe he's going to become an all-star, and like you would want to see that this year. This would need to be the year 4 jump, but like I'm not entirely sold on that. And also, he and Dylan Harper would coexist just fine. And then you figure out the Scoot Henderson problem. But at this point, position should not be a consideration at all.
No.
Regardless of where they're drafting. I mean, you go get the best player. Now, would I draft another big center who plays sort of like Donovan Clingan? Like, no, I would look for complementary skill set there. But other than that, like, I mean, position's just not on my radar for where the Blazers are.
Yeah, no. X-nay. I do not care about position. So,
are you watching the NBA playoffs, Brenna?
I've been taking a gander at them every once in a while. Yes,
it's been a lot of fun. It's been full of upsets.
Yeah.
Down have gone number 1 seeds. Boston is suddenly in a 2-game
it.
hole. Cleveland is in a 2-game hole. Pretty wild stuff. In the Western Conference, the Denver Nuggets and Oklahoma City Thunder are tied. And when we talk about upsets, there may be no bigger upset than the fact that it is Portland's own David Adelman leading the Denver Nuggets into the second round of the playoffs. David Adelman only became the Nuggets head coach with 3 games left in the regular season after the Nuggets shocked the basketball world by parting ways with Michael Malone. It's been, I think you would have to say a huge success for Adelman, who shares an alma mater with you,
Yes.
who brought Gene Potter, the Jesuit, longtime legendary Jesuit coach, along to Denver during the playoffs, during the first series. And as we all know, David Adelman's first coaching job was his first head coaching job.
Lincoln High School,
2006-07. I had fun this week. I called a bunch of those former players who were on his first team, which was a fun trip down memory lane for them and for me. Discovered that one of the players on that team used to work with me at the Athletic, Wes McCabe. And so I was talking to Connor Cavanaugh, who went on to be the quarterback at Portland State, and he just started talking about blah blah blah. And he's like, "Yeah, Wes McCabe sent me this picture," and I'm like, "I know that name. Why do I know that name?" And so I'm on the phone with him. I'm Googling because I'm like, that sounds so familiar. So I Googled my name with his name, Bill Oram, Wes McCabe. And it brought up a bunch of stories I'd done at the Athletic because Wes, who I've never actually met, but he did a lot of the visual stuff, the graphics at the Athletic. So for big feature stories, he would be the one who'd create a photo illustration to be at the top of the story. So when I did a story about how the Lakers ended up with Frank Vogel instead of Tyronn Lue, he did that one. When I wrote a story about Marc Gasol's crazy draft night experience and how his career came full circle to get back to the Lakers, Marc Gasol got very drunk in Ibiza and was asleep by the time the Lakers drafted him 46th overall, but not important. Wes McCabe had made the photo illustration for that too, and so it was so funny to be reporting the story and learn that. And I remember, I think when I got the job at the Oregonian, or maybe I'd written something, maybe when I wrote about Game 7 between the Lakers and Blazers in 2000, Wes did the visuals for that and messaged me. He's like, "Hey, I really enjoyed this because I'm from Portland, so this was a really fun one for me." And I remember that, but I didn't know that he played for David Adelman at Lincoln. So that was kind of a fun twist to this one. But the Jesuit connection, which we were talking about a little bit off air, is incredible. And the Gene Potter stuff is very sweet. And what David Adelman said in a press conference was that Gene Potter knows more about basketball or is a better coach than half the coaches in the league, which I think people chuckled at, but people in Oregon would say is pretty close to true. But when I talked to Jeff Peeler, who was the athletic director at Wilson, who hired David Adelman, he said that he remembered having conversations with David sitting around in the Wilson athletic office. Or why am I saying Wilson? The Lincoln athletic offices. Did I say Wilson a lot of times?
No. You just said it twice right now. That's all.
Okay. Kelly Doyle, we fixed that in post. Just it superimposed Lincoln over Wilson a couple of times. Okay, thank you. Sitting around in the Lincoln athletic offices, saying, dreaming about, making it to the NBA, and hey, if I ever become an NBA head coach, I'm bringing Gene Potter along with me, and saying that 15 years ago. And he was like, I can 100% confirm that David Adelman was saying that when he was coaching the Lincoln Cardinals, and to see it happen was pretty darn cool. Do you have a take?
Do I have a take?
Yeah.
Well,
it wasn't cool at all, Bill, actually.
My first take is, Gene Potter, do an interview with me.
Seriously, pick up the phone, Gene.
He denied me. It's all right, I get it. Yeah. Well, the thing I wanted to talk to him about, which is kind of the bigger take here, which I find just fascinating, is that there are 3 head coaches in the NBA right now from Portland, and none of them are coaching the Trailblazers. And you also have an NBA GM who is not with the Trailblazers. Well, it's crazy.
And so then the other piece of this is, obviously, Mike Dunleavy Jr. with the Warriors.
Yep.
Played at Jesuit, was a teammate with David Adelman. They win a state championship together. The Warriors are up 1-0 in their series over the Timberwolves. Nuggets got smoked in Game 2 against OKC. Yeah. So feeling a little less enthusiasm for the idea that Denver's going to beat OKC because that should not happen. But there is a world where you have former Jesuit teammates facing off in the conference finals with
Yeah.
with the guy who's built this Golden State roster and then the guy who's currently coaching this Denver roster,
Yeah.
which would be pretty incredible.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, insane. And then, the other person, in case you're wondering, if you haven't put together the other person is from Portland, that would be Ime Udoka. So,
Correct.
yeah, it's just, I tweeted it the other day. I was like, I don't mean any shade by this whatsoever, but it's just crazy that, like, there are 3 NBA head coaches right now from Portland who are not coaching the Portland Trailblazers. Like, that's just so bizarre to me.
Do you think those things usually work out? Like, I mean, I think I've had this conversation with some people. Like, I think David Adelman would have been a good hire for the Blazers if they had not gotten things worked out with Chauncey. If the Nuggets had rolled with Michael Malone, like, there was plenty of chatter around Adelman and the Blazers, this spring. I mean, part of me feels like Denver kind of preempted that by saying, we know we're going to come off Malone anyway. They didn't want to lose him. Didn't know what Portland was going to do with Chauncey. I mean, I think the tea leaves were pointing to them parting ways, frankly. So
I agree with you.
So I don't know how much of that was intentional versus just sort of the way it worked out, but you certainly conspiratorially wonder. Do you think that there would have been a downside to hiring like a hometown kid? Because then you get the great story of like, oh, you got Rick Adelman's son and he's coming home. His first job was just down the road at Lincoln High School. Like, do those things, is there a risk of the narrative subsuming kind of the actual basketball and that being a problem?
Well, I guess I would say now, like, looking at it, the obviously the Denver Nuggets thought he was good enough to coach in the playoffs. So
to coach Nikola Jokic.
Yes. So I think that that narrative can be put to bed. If the Nuggets thought he was good enough to coach them in the playoffs,
yeah,
like, he was definitely good enough to come coach the Portland Trailblazers in his hometown. So I understand people that were like, oh, we're just falling in love with the idea of this and the story of it, but it's not actually reality. But the Nuggets kind of confirmed that it was reality by saying goodbye to Michael Malone, who won an NBA championship with them, and hiring David. I mean, in this unprecedented situation. So
yeah, I actually tend to agree with you. And like, I think that probably, so all coaching situations end poorly. Like, almost all of them. Like, unless you're going to have a situation where, a coach retires, goes out on top. I mean, my mind is kind of going to Greg Popovich, which is a unique situation in its own right. But like, didn't quite get to go out on his own terms, but is, kind of rising. The El Jefe thing was really sweet. But for the most part, most coaches either get fired or don't get the contract they want, and they don't leave with great feelings. Those would certainly be magnified at the end, right? Like, David Adelman comes here, he's the Blazers coach for 7 years. Things would eventually lead to his departure, most likely, and something would go wrong. And I think that'd be magnified because he's from here. Maybe the scrutiny and the criticism would be a little harsher because he's from here. Like, ask Damon Stoudemire what that was like. So I think that, like, but if you had a coaching opening, would those factors that I'm describing outweigh hiring a guy who clearly knows what the heck he is doing? I was so close to saying a bad word there to like really emphasize my point. Like, when I was like, you know what, this is a family show. Like, I was so close. You have no idea. That might be the closest I've ever come to saying a bad word on this show.
I feel like you've said a bad word on this show before.
Not that word.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, again, like, this is all fantasy because Chauncey Billups has a new multi-year contract. And David Adelman's going to be the head coach in Denver. I think you can book it. I mean, Denver's not going to let him go now. I mean, if the playoffs were like a trial period or a test run for him, he has passed with flying colors. Winning a 7-game series against a team that had Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, going into OKC and coming back from a double-digit, I think you're down 14 with 4.5 minutes left, or 11 with 4.5 minutes left. Like, seeing that through, obviously players have to make plays, but that's all a reflection of like the mentality of your bench leader. So
Mhm.
big credit to David Adelman there. I mean, I think that he has earned and won the job in Denver. So interesting to reflect on how just a few weeks ago, there were a lot of people who thought that David Adelman would be a coach in Portland. And, now the seas have sailed, the winds have blown the sails in other directions, and that's okay. But one more point about Jesuit, since we're still on this. I was talking to Will Kuster, who's in my piece on David Adelman, who is David Adelman's best friend since they were like 3 years old. He was his assistant at Wilson.
Mhm.
Gosh darn it, Lincoln. I don't know why this is
so,
happening.
This is so weird, too, because it's not even Wilson anymore.
No, I know. And not only is it not Wilson, my kids like play sports for like Wells Youth Sports. Like, I know this. But like, I cannot stop. I don't know why.
You are a runaway trade.
I know. Wilson! He was his assistant at Lincoln. And we were talking sort of, beyond the framework of what we were talking about. And we were talking about the same thing. Like, you've got Spo, you've got Mike Dunleavy, you've got David Adelman. And I posed the thought, among NBA coaches and general managers or like top executives, Jesuit has to be the most well-represented high school in the country, right? Like, what other high school has 3 people in those positions? So per capita, does Jesuit High School have more influence on the NBA right now than any other high school in the country or the world, for that matter?
I mean, I think that maybe there's like some sort of situation with like Montverde or something like that.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, does Oak Hill have people who have, but I mean, Montverde, like, there's plenty, sure.
I still think that that's a different situation than Jesuit, because those schools are basketball high schools. Like, that's what they were created to be. They were created to be basketball high schools. Whereas Jesuit, that's not the intention there. So, I think in terms of that, in terms of like, if you take those schools that were made to be basketball schools and that's it, schools out of the equation, I can't imagine there's another high school that has more.
I mean, I still don't know if you'd get there. Like, I'm just trying to think, because like you'd be talking about former players in those positions. Like Trajan Langdon went to South Anchorage or Service High School, I can't remember, but he went to public school in Anchorage. Jason Kidd didn't go to a fancy prep school. He went to East Anchorage. There you go. So I don't know. I mean, like, it would be a worthwhile study for someone who has more time than I do. How about that? But it's possible.
I mean, and then you want to add in like, someone else who has a lot of connections in the Portland area, Nico Harrison. Like,
if you want somebody from Portland to work for the Trailblazers, Nico could be looking for a job real soon. Sorry, Nico. I am really, really sorry. Like, shout out Tiger, but like, just think that maybe Nico and Dallas just need it might be a real, like, it's not you, it's me situation. Like, it's time to start seeing other people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess at least for him, the Lakers flamed out. That probably, I thought about him. I was like, I bet you he feels real good right now.
I was listening to the Press Box, my favorite podcast, Brian Curtis and David Shoemaker on the Ringer Podcast Network.
Great podcast.
And they were talking about, I believe, the idea that like the night the Lakers lost was maybe like the first like good night that Nico Harrison has had since trading Luka to the Lakers, because it was like the moment that he was like could maybe exhale and be like moderately validated. Like, it's going to take more than like one playoff exit, but maybe finally he was able to get a good night of sleep. And you are hearing the takes like, hey, maybe Nico was right. I don't think Dallas fans are going to see it that way ever, but hey, maybe Nico was right. We have to wait and see what history has to say about this.
Yes, we do.
I will say the Blazers could have put together a better package for Luka than the one that Nico got, but that's neither here nor there.
Was never going to happen. So
no, of course it wasn't. Nothing's ever going to happen.
Collusion. Yeah, is what it is. Is what it is. We keep moving on. Portland will never be involved in a big time trade for a big time player coming here.
That's not true.
That's not true. I don't know. Hasn't happened in my
I think.
lifetime.
Oh, I disagree. I think. I think that you said it hasn't happened in your lifetime, or it won't happen
No,
in your lifetime.
hasn't happened.
What about the Scottie Pippen trade?
Okay, I can understand that, but he also was quite a bit older at that point when they traded for him.
Okay, and he was not an all-star in Portland ever. That's fair. And also that was in an era where players did not dictate their own paths as much. But I
Exactly.
also think like if the NBA is going to stay in Portland, Oregon, and stay in small markets, the league is going to have to figure out um, how to probably, I'm not saying reverse the trend of players picking their own destinations, but to find ways for small markets to be able to participate in those. So I do think it'll happen. I also think that like, you know, the way, I mean, Oklahoma City is a great example. Oklahoma City, traded for Paul George. Oklahoma City traded for Carmelo Anthony. They use their assets, and the Blazers, it's been fits and starts, and they're obviously not doing as cleanly as OKC did. And, Joe Cronin does not have the track record that Sam Presti has and all that. But like they're trying to build an arsenal of assets that they could use in that kind of deal. So I'm not saying it's going to be this summer. I'm not saying it's going to be next summer, but I think that like Portland can build a foundation eventually that like a star player would want to be a part of, where they build a foundation with the right number of picks to make a trade eventually. Like I don't think that's out of the question. The question I have for you, Brenna, is can you name the 6 players the Blazers traded to Houston for Scottie Pippen in the summer of 1999? Because I think I
No.
can. I think I can.
I was what, 7 years old? Yeah, no.
Okay, let me think. Let's see if I can do this.
Okay.
Brian
The
Shaw.
only trade I remember from that era was when they traded Jermaine O'Neal, and I was upset about that.
I was thrilled when they traded Jermaine O'Neal. Jermaine needed to go somewhere he could play, and the Blazers needed help up front. It didn't end up working out the way I thought, but I was very happy they got Dale Davis at the time. Okay, in 1999, the Blazers did a 6-for-1 trade with Houston for Scottie Pippen. I believe I'm trying to jot these down just so I can get.
I will say this.
Is this good podcast content? I don't even know if this is good. If this is good
I
for
don't know if it is either, but I will say this. I do have, this is a real thing. I have a clip on Coin from when I was like 12, and there was a trade that day where they traded Nick Van Exel. Wait, no, I think they traded for Nick Van Exel, and they got rid of Dan Dickau and a few other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was firing off my takes about the trade at 12 years old in a club sport. Why did they need me to talk about the trade? I don't know. I just remember them coming to the basketball courts and being like, "Hey, would any girls want to talk?" And I was like, "I'll talk about it." And yeah, so there you go. There's my first time on TV, was
Were
talking
you
about how I was
devastated that
happy
Dan?
for Dan Dickau.
I
That's a
remember
real
that trade.
thing.
Hold on. I'm going to go to the transactions page because I do remember that vaguely. Traded by the Portland Trailblazers with Dale Davis. See, Dale Davis to Golden State for Nick Van Exel. That's how that one happened. So we know what Brenna was doing on July 20th, 2004. Okay. I believe the 6 players. Oh, I can't remember. Okay. I believe the 6 players were Brian Shaw, Kelvin Cato, Stacey Augmon, Walt Williams, Ed Gray, and Carlos Rogers.
Okay. Yeah, those are names. Some of them I recognize, but I was not a fan of the team at that point.
I can't remember if it was. I'm trying to remember if it was Carlos Rogers or Gary Grant. I think it was Carlos Rogers. Let us see. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was Carlos Rogers. Scottie Pippen's transaction page. Stacey Augman, Kelvin Cato, Ed Gray, Carlos Rogers, Brian Shaw, Walt Williams. Still got it. It's still got it.
Old guy still got it.
No,
In the words of the
guy.
press box.
This used to be my party trick, and where I would say, like, I can name the 6 players the Blazers traded for Scottie Pippen in 1999. I did this to Joe Cronin one time. He was like, "Who were they?" And then I was put on the spot and had to make sure I was right. But yeah, those are the 6. Good party trick. Recommend it. Real conversation starter because people are like, "Who the hell is Ed Gray?" Well, Ed Gray was drafted by the Atlanta Hawks and played 60 games in the NBA. Carlos Rogers came to the Blazers in the Damon Stoudemire trade with Walt Williams. Number 42, the Wizard. Kelvin Cato started at center for the Rockets for years until they got Yao Ming. Brian Shaw, by the way, this is just like, you know what? It's like a summer podcast. There's nothing going on.
This is a very summer podcast.
There's nothing going on. So here's a piece of this is something I wrote when I was at the Athletic. Wes McCabe from Lincoln High School, not Wilson, was involved in the art on this story. So Brian Shaw gets traded to the Rockets in '99. Do you happen to remember anything about Brian Shaw from the 1999-2000 season?
No.
He did not play in Houston. The Houston Rockets cut him, and he signs with the Lakers because Phil Jackson loves big guards. So they bring in Brian Shaw to back up, Kobe, Derek Fisher, playing that backcourt, and Ron Harper. And what happens? Brian Shaw goes nutso in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. I mean, by Brian Shaw standards, hits that 3 to banks in that 3 right before the end of the third quarter. That everybody watching that game was like, "Uh-oh!" And then hits another 3 early in the fourth, and the Blazers were still paying him.
Amazing.
And so, I did an oral history with Jason Quick, my buddy who's still at the Athletic. He used to work for the Oregonian. Everybody loves Jason Quick. Great story by Quick this week, by the way, on George Karl. Great story on George Karl. Go read it.
I need to read it.
It's phenomenal. Tremendous work. Great perspective from George. Unbelievably human. But Quick and I did this story together on Game 7. It was an oral history 20 years later, looking back at Game 7. And Brian Shaw, I guess I should pull this up and read some of the quotes, but Brian Shaw thought it was the funniest thing ever that the Blazers, the Blazers had signed him and he never played. He just sat behind the bench. He never played. And then they use him in this trade. In fact, it might have even been one of those things where they signed him just for the purpose to trade him. Not a sign and trade, but because they did this a year later. You mentioned that Jermaine O'Neal, Dale Davis trade. Joe Klein was with the Blazers and had retired after the 2000 season. And then Bob Whitsitt calls him up and says, "Hey, I need your contract to make this deal for Dale Davis and Jermaine O'Neal work. Will you sign a $1 million contract just so I can trade you to Indiana? You can stay retired." And so Joe Klein said, "Yes, easiest deal ever." And so he did. If you look, Joe Klein got traded to Indiana with Jermaine O'Neal for Dale Davis, never played. It was just a free $1 million.
That's incredible.
And I believe, now that I'm going off the top of my head, I believe the Blazers did the same thing with Brian Shaw in the Houston deal. Bob Whitsitt called and as a favor was "Hey, we'll sign you to this deal to send you to Houston so we can make the Scottie trade work." He's like, "Okay." And then boom, gets cut by the Rockets, which of course was going to happen because Brian Shaw's career was functionally over, and the Lakers pick him up because Phil Jackson liked big guards, and then he was the Blazer killer in Game 7. It is painful. It is painful.
Yeah, no, I remember the pain viscerally. That was my first heartbreaking sports moment. Yeah. And then I believe it was the next year or the year after, but I think it was the next year. It could have been the year after. When Oregon lost to Stanford during their season with Joey Harrington and knocked themselves out of contention for the national championship game. And I learned very quickly what it was like to be a fan of sports in Oregon. So, between that and the Blazers, I really got an indoctrination very quickly. But here we are. This is just what we do.
Wasn't it the next year that Oregon, Oregon State, and Washington all finished tied for first place in the Pac-10 and all beat each other because Oregon State's only loss was to Washington. That was the year they won the Fiesta Bowl. Oregon State beat Oregon, and Oregon beat Washington. And through the various tiebreakers, the Huskies went to the Rose Bowl against Purdue and Drew Brees, if memory serves. Oregon State goes to the Fiesta Bowl. Maybe Oregon also, and then Oregon went to the Holiday Bowl and played Texas. Am I getting my years confused? That's what I remember. But
no, I
to
think
your point,
right. That makes sense. That makes sense to me. And yes, I do believe it was the next year. Well, it's 2001. It was 2001.
Okay.
October 20th, 2001, when Oregon lost to Stanford 49-42. And I screamed, I hate that dancing tree on the concourse walking out of Austin.
You know who does not hate that dancing tree, by the way? Bengal Branson, Oregonian Sports Podcast favorite Bengal Branson, who transferred to Stanford last week and is gonna play quarterback at Stanford. Good for Bengal Branson.
Good for Ben. I'm glad that you pronounced his name correctly now.
I've learned and I've worked on it. Okay, Brenna, you know what was not a painful time?
This
episode of the Oregonian Sports Podcast. It was terrific. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the conversation. You know, you just don't get conversation like this for free anymore. You know, you gotta come to work to do it, to have this sort of like human interaction. Really appreciate our listener. Maybe.
We'll have a lot more to talk about next week. That's less scatterbrained and ADHD.
I have found this to be very enjoyable, very instructive. What we learned is that the Blazers have a 10% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, much better than the fake news would have you believe. We are on our way.
There we go. It's Monday. Let's do it, baby.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with more takes and more very meandering trips down memory lane. Thank you for listening.